book of Zephaniah, Judgment and Restoration. The book of Zephaniah is a short but impactful text found among the minor prophets in the Old Testament, written by the prophet Zephaniah during the reign of King Josiah, likely in the late 7th century BC. The book presents a striking message of both impending judgment and hopeful restoration. Zephaniah, speaking on behalf of God, delivers a powerful warning to the people of Judah about their sin and the coming day of the Lord. However, like many prophetic messages, it also offers the promise of hope and renewal for those who turn back to God. The prophetic context. Zephaniah begins with a grim announcement. The day of the Lord is near, and it will bring destruction not only to Judah, but to the entire earth. The book opens with a declaration that God will sweep away everything from the face of the earth. Zephaniah 1:2. This catastrophic vision reveals the seriousness of humanity's sin and the extent to which it has impacted creation. However, the focus of the prophecy is primarily on Judah and Jerusalem. During the reign of Josiah, the kingdom of Judah was experiencing outward reforms under the king's leadership, yet the hearts of many people remained unchanged. Idolatry, moral decay, and complacency were rampant, and the nation had largely turned away from God. Despite Josiah's efforts to bring spiritual revival, the people continued in their sinful practices. Zephaniah's prophecy therefore addresses this deep-seated corruption and announces that God's judgment is imminent. Judgment on Judah. Zephaniah spares no detail in describing the impending judgment on Judah. The people had embraced idolatry, worshipping false gods like Baal and practicing syncretism, where they blended the worship of Yahweh with other pagan beliefs. They also engaged in acts of violence and fraud, and the political and religious leaders were corrupt, caring little for the well-being of the people. In Zephaniah 1:12, the prophet highlights one of the key issues: complacency. The people believed that God would neither act for good nor for harm, essentially seeing him as indifferent to their actions. This spiritual apathy was dangerous. In response, Zephaniah warns of the coming day of the Lord, which will be a time of reckoning, darkness, and distress for those who have turned away from God. This day of the Lord was not just a day of destruction. It represented the moment when God would set things right, punishing sin and bringing justice. The imagery Zephaniah uses is severe. Cities will be destroyed, people will cry out in anguish, and the powerful will be brought low. But amid this harsh language, the purpose of the judgment is to awaken the people to their need for repentance and to restore their relationship with God. Judgment extends to the nations. While the primary focus of Zephaniah's message is Judah, the prophet also addresses the nations surrounding them. In chapters 2 and 3, Zephaniah delivers God's judgment on Philistia, Moab, Ammon, Cush, and Assyria. These nations had either oppressed God's people or led them into idolatry. The enemies of Judah, who had acted with arrogance and cruelty, would also face the judgment of the Lord. Philistia, located to the west of Judah, would be devastated. Moab and Ammon, descendants of Lot, were judged for their pride and mockery of Israel. The Cushites, representing the distant southern regions, would not escape God's reach, and Assyria, the powerful empire that once dominated the region, would face total destruction. Nineveh, Assyria's proud capital, would become desolate. Through this, Zephaniah reinforces the idea that God's sovereignty extends over all nations. No one, whether Judah or its enemies, can escape his righteous judgment. Yet this global judgment also reflects God's intention to purify the nations and restore them to a place where they can acknowledge and worship him. A call to repentance. Amid these prophecies of destruction, Zephaniah offers a message of hope for the humble and repentant. In Zephaniah 2:3, the prophet urges, "Seek the Lord, all you humble of the land, you who do what he commands. Seek righteousness. Seek humility. Perhaps you will be sheltered on the day of the Lord's anger." This call to repentance emphasizes that God's judgment is not inevitable for all. There is a way out. Seeking God with sincerity, turning from sin, and living in humility. Those who pursue righteousness and seek God wholeheartedly can find shelter and protection, even in the midst of the coming judgment. This message provides a stark contrast to the fate awaiting the arrogant and the complacent. God's heart remains open to those who turn back to him. Promise of restoration. As the prophecy reaches its conclusion, the tone of the book shifts dramatically from one of judgment to one of hope and restoration. After the destruction, there is a promise of renewal and peace. In Zephaniah 3:9, God declares that he will purify the lips of the peoples, that all of them may call on the name of the Lord and serve him shoulder to shoulder. This vision is not limited to Judah. It extends to the nations. God's ultimate plan is not just to judge, but to restore. The peoples of the earth will be cleansed, and they will call on the name of the Lord with pure hearts. In this future, all nations will be united in their worship of God, and there will be peace among them. For Judah, God promises to gather the scattered and humble people, remove their shame, and restore them to a place of honor. Zephaniah 3:14-17 is one of the most beautiful expressions of God's love and joy over his restored people. The Lord your God is with you, the mighty warrior who saves. He will take great delight in you. In his love, he will no longer rebuke you, but will rejoice over you with singing. Here we see the fullness of God's character. He is not only a God of justice, but also a God of immense love and compassion. After the period of judgment, God rejoices over his people. He delights in their restoration, and he promises to dwell in their midst, bringing peace and security. Conclusion. The message of Zephaniah. The book of Zephaniah presents a balanced message of both judgment and hope. On one hand, it paints a vivid picture of God's righteous anger against sin, emphasizing the seriousness of idolatry, complacency, and injustice. The day of the Lord serves as a reminder that God will hold all people accountable for their actions. However, Zephaniah also reveals God's profound love and desire to restore his people. His judgment is not meant to destroy without hope, but to lead to purification and renewal. The call to repentance offers a way out, and the promise of restoration shows that God's ultimate goal is to bring his people back into a right relationship with him, where they can experience his joy and peace. The timeless message of Zephaniah challenges us to reflect on our own lives. Are we complacent or humble before God? Are we seeking his righteousness? And do we trust in his power to both correct and restore? As we navigate our own struggles, the message of Zephaniah reminds us that while God's justice is real, his love and mercy are even greater, offering us the hope of renewal and joy in his presence.